If this is you, we need to talk. If this is you, we need to put an end to this today, and I want to help you do it. I've run jazz and gypsy jazz camps now for 10 years, and the biggest obstacle I find is having students detach themselves from charts and iReal books and real books and really learn how to learn tunes practically on the spot. This might definitely not happen overnight, but I definitely want you to start today. Stick with me till the end of the video, and I promise if you can count to 7, trust me, you can do this much more easily than what you might think today. I am Dario Napoli, 20-year recording and touring artist, founder of the Under the Tuscan Sun Gypsy Jazz Camp, author of Gypsy Jazz Guitar Mastery, and a bunch of other stuff that you can find out. So just to clarify, I'm not against using charts or real books or iReal books, but what I'm against is being dependent on it, being a slave to the chart. I know some of you from experience, if you jump into a jam session and you don't know the tune, you automatically go into panic mode and you're not able yet to use your ears and your eyes and your instincts to essentially learn a tune on the spot in 1 or 2 goes. Now, besides just the practical reasons of having a great advantage when you learn how to learn tunes on the spot, it has to do also with your overall musicianship. Your ability to improve this and to gradually get to a point where you can learn tunes almost on the spot is going to improve every other aspect of you being a musician. So it won't help you just practically, it will also help improve everything else. Memorizing tunes, improvising, etc. Okay, so the very first thing is a mindset shift. What we want to do is stop thinking of tunes in terms of individual chords. But we want to think of tunes as overarching structures that contain chords. It's that much harder when you think of individual chords to memorize tunes because some tunes might have 20, 30, 50 chords if you look at them individually. So it's quite the task to remember them individually. But when you start looking at a tune as structures such as an A section or an A1 section or an A2 section, and then a B section or a C section, then those contain all those chords. And when you can remember the structure, maybe a tune will have 2, 3, 4 structures, and once you memorize those, it'll be much, much easier to then remember and memorize tunes. Now let's take, for an example, the tune we just heard at the beginning, What Is This Thing Called Love? This is a typical A-B-A structure. So what does that mean? You have 75% of the tune in this case is the A structure. In other words, that set of chords or measures that essentially repeat always in the same way. So if I can memorize one A structure, I basically memorized 3/4 or 75% of the tune. Then all I have to do is memorize the B section and I will have memorized the tune. Now, the second step to this is to not think of individual chord names, but to think of I guess posh jazzers would call them Roman numerals. Or you could just think of 7 numbers. In other words, in any key, the number of chords pretty much that you have at your disposal is 7. It could be a 1, which is your root. It could be a 5, which is your dominant, etc. Thinking in Roman numerals or in numbers or in degrees, 1 through 7, will also help you change keys a lot more easily than if you think in terms of chord names. This tune is specifically, what is this thing called Love, is a tune that is in C major. But let's say I play with a singer who sings it in, I don't know, E flat. If I think in terms of Roman numerals and therefore intervals, then it will be a whole lot easier to make that transposition and play the tune in different keys than if I think of the tune in the actual original chord names. And then finally, the last thing to take into consideration is that your chord families or your chord types are essentially 3. You can have major chords and all relative voicings or alterations of a major chord, minor chords and its alterations, or dominant chords. So once you can identify the root of each chord, then it's simply a question of placing or categorizing that chord in either a major chord, a minor chord, or a dominant chord, or a variation of. Yes, there of course are diminished chords, half diminished chords, altered chords, but in terms of the function of that chord in a tune, you're essentially going to break it down into either major, minor, or dominant primarily. So quick recap. First of all, don't think of tunes in terms of sequence of chords, but think of them in overarching structures. Don't think in terms of individual chords, but think in terms of Roman numerals or 1 through 7 degrees. And finally, when thinking about chords, learn how to identify and categorize as major, minor, or dominant. Okay, so let's use this tune to do exactly that. So we've already established that what is this thing called love is an AABA, right? So let's tackle that A section, which once we do, we will have learned 75% of the tune, or 3/4 of it. Essentially, what do we have? We have a 2-5-1 in F minor, and then a 2-5-1 in C major, which is the key of the tune. So again, what do I mean by 2-5-1? So instead of saying G half diminished, C7, F minor, I'm going to say 1 in this case is F minor is my 1. So where's my 2, right? If F is my 1, 2 is always a full step up. And that's going to be my G, half diminished. 5 is what? 5 of F is C. And in this case, it's going to be C7, of course, as usually it is. A 5 is a dominant, which is a 7th chord. And back to my 1, which is F minor. And then 2-5-1 in C major. In this case, 2 is going to be half diminished. So now if C is my 1, then 2 is going to be D, right? Again, for the same rationale. And again, it's going to be half diminished, right? Which is a form of a minor chord. Then G7 is my 5, and 1 is my C. Or, now what I highly suggest doing is doing this exercise or having the ability to find these 2-5-1s at least relative to 2 roots. So in the first example, my root was my F here on the 1st fret. So then my G, my 2 was right here. My 5 was right here. My 1 is right here again. But now what if my 1, in this case F minor, is here on the 8th fret? So I'm not only going to take into consideration the F here on the 6th string 1st fret, but I'm also going to take into consideration F minor with the root on the 5th string 8th fret, right? So I have these 2 roots that I want to be just as comfortable using, right? So then what's my 2? relative to this F minor. It's going to be right here at the 10th fret. My 5 is going to be right here at the 8th fret. And then F is here, right here, my 1. So just as comfortable as right here, I want to be just as comfortable here. And same thing when I'm going to be doing the same 2-5-1 relative to C major. So if C major, I had 2, 5, 1, now I also have 2, in other words, D half diminished, G7, and then my 1, C major or C major 6, C major 6-9. So that's what I highly suggest doing. Start with being comfortable identifying the main intervals relative to 2 roots. Now that's my A section. So if I can just remember 2-5-1 in F minor and then 2-5-1 in C major, I don't have to look at all those chords. I just know that that's the sequence. And that'll happen twice because I have 2 A sections in a row at the beginning, A1, A2, then I have my B section, and then I have a last A section which is just the same. And now to learn the B section, all I have to do is remember that it goes to a 2-5-1 in B flat, 2, 5, 1, and then it goes to the sharp 5 of C, which is G sharp 7, and then it goes to the 5 of C, which is G7. So all I have to do to remember my B section is 2-5-1 in B flat major, and then sharp 5 for one measure, and 5, so G sharp and G7. All right, so and by the same rationale, because I did this relative to B flat major at the 6th fret, 6th string, I also want to be able to do this relative to the B flat over here at the 1st fret or at the 11th fret. So what it'll be C minor 7, F7, 2, 5, 1, right? Or if I were to play it up here, C minor, or in other words 2, F7 is your 5, B flat major, and then G sharp 7, in other words sharp 5, and then 5, which is G7 or G9. Okay, so let's stop there for a minute. I want you to grasp the importance of understanding how everything revolves around 7 notes, 7 intervals, degrees, you can call them how you want, but it's those 7 notes. And let's take C as an example, right? If I have my C major scale, each of these is going to be a note, but it's also going to be a chord. So in the key of C major, my 2 is going to be minor. So C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G7, A minor, and then I'm going to go to the 7th degree, which is B half diminished, and back to 1. So when I'm playing in the key of C, those are going to be the kind of chords I'm going to run into. In this case, the 2nd degree was half diminished and not minor 7, but it's simply an alteration or an alternative, but it's still a minor chord, right? 2, 5, 1, just like 2, 5, 1. So what you want to do is identify and feel comfortable hearing and seeing where those intervals are relative to the 2 roots. That's the whole key. So a very simple thing you can do is just play the root and alternate it with those individual 7 notes, right? So 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, 7, 1. And now that I did that relative to this root, I'm going to do it relative to this root. 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, which is also, because this E can be here or can be the open string, right? So then my 4, F, or relative to the 1. 5, which is G, right? And then I'm going to have my 6, which is A. 7, which is going to be B. And back to 1. You can find that same interval in different directions. In other words, my 3rd can be, or it's still an E, but it'll have a different sounding relationship, but it's the same note, 1 and 3. So what's very important is that you identify those 7 intervals relative to those 2 roots. Once you can do that, you can play any tune in any key at any given moment because you know where to find those intervals and you understand those structures. So 2, 5, 1 in F minor, and then 2, 5, 1 in C. If I were to say, let's play this tune in E flat, now I would know to play a 2, 5 in A flat minor, and then a 2, 5 in E flat. Now, another thing that I highly, highly recommend you do, especially at home, of course, is to sing. Sing these intervals, because in singing them, you will much, much quickly transfer that memory from your ear to your fingers and back. So every time you work on those intervals, do, do, my 5th, do, do, do. So I have my 5th, which is my G, and I want to be able to identify that 5th in both directions. On a lower register, da, bo, ba. And in a higher register, do, da, do. 3rd, da, do. Do, da. I'm not a singer, but do, do, da. Why is this important? Because bass lines are just like melodies, or are melodies in and of themselves. So if I'm playing this tune and I can recognize and listen to the bass line as a melody, then I won't have to necessarily know how to name the chord or what key I'm really actually even in. But I will recognize that melody of those individual 2 5s. So in this case, da, 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 da. And once you can identify the family of the chord, and again, it's only 3, it's not 35 chords, family types. 3, major, minor, and dominant, right? So I have minor, in this case, minor 7 flat 5, but minor, dominant, minor, another minor, dominant, major. This will also help tremendously once you get into walking lines, walking bass lines, and moving bass lines. Because at that point you can really play with the harmony. Just as a quick example of a moving, walking bass line, but it still revolves around those intervals and those chords. So once again, stop thinking of tunes in terms of sequence of chords, but in terms of structures. Think in terms of Roman numerals or just numbers, in this case 7 centers or degrees or notes of the key. And lastly, 3 family of chords: major, minor, and dominant. Once you can break things down comfortably in terms of these 3 aspects, there's no tune that you won't be able to tackle. And remember, singing these intervals will help you develop your ear and recognize all these aspects quicker. So don't be afraid to sing. Remember, learning to learn tunes on the spot is vital, not only for practical reasons, because you can then have a lot more fun and be a lot more at ease in jam sessions and in musical situations, but your overall musicianship will just skyrocket because you will have a much better understanding of tunes and a much better ear to identify tunes and then also improvise over them or accompany. Also, jazz is a music of interplay, so if your eyes are stuck in a chart, you will be missing a lot of different cues and a lot of the communication that needs to happen between musicians. So let's chuck that real book. Let's learn how to learn tunes on the spot and communicate and dialogue with other musicians rather than have your head stuck in a chart, in an iReal book or a real book. I truly hope this video helped you. Please let me know in the comments if there's any questions, if anything was not clear. And definitely let me know if any of this works for you. I know it will work for you because it's worked for me and for tons of other musicians that I've helped over the years. Don't forget to check the links in the description. I have some useful tools I think that might benefit you. My new book, Gypsy Jazz Guitar Mastery, my Tuesday night Zooms, as well as my free transcriptions. All the best in your musical journey, and I'll see you in the next video.